What is up, YouTube? JamieTheKid00 here, coming to you guys with a brand new deck profile. Long time no see, must apologise for the long delay. We're just going to jump straight into this. This is my new Psy-Frame list. A few of you guys who follow me around on Dual Network will have seen me testing this previously, and I've been having a good bit of fun with it. It's definitely by no means top tier. I wouldn't see myself playing this at any competitive events, but I'm going to be fielding it at my locals, which will actually be going on by the time I post this, just because I don't want to reveal my list for that local event. Because I know a lot of people watch my channel, so I figured I'm going to show you guys the deck profile, and it'll come out while I'm there. This is the rough draft of what I've been kind of playing with on Dual Network. I've tweaked it a little bit based on what I own and what I feel needs to change on my Dual Network list, but I'm really lazy, so I haven't changed that yet. But this is the build I plan on working with. So we're just going to jump straight into the main deck first of all. I've obtained most of this in French because it's actually like the best price. It was cheaper to get this in French than in English. So I've got all of the core in French, so that's why all the names are different. So to start off the deck, we're playing 3 copies of Psy-Frame Driver. This is your kind of bread and butter of the deck. This guy's your most important guy, even though he's a normal monster. Every single one of your Psy-Frame or Psy-Frame gears revolves and requires around summoning the driver. And they all are tuners, and they all, in the end of the turn, banish themselves and this guy if they were summoned by their own effect. It's all you realistically need to know. To resolve the negation effect of this, of one of these, you have to special summon it, summon the driver, and then they'll both be banished in the end of the turn. That's quite literally all they do, but you always need to have one of these guys to pull from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So we're going to get into the cards that will make that banishment a little less relevant. So to go through the Psy-Frame gears, they're all relatively similar except for this guy. So this is Psy-Frame Gear Alpha, and I'm playing 3 copies of it. Psy-Frame Gear Alpha's effect is that when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can reveal this card in hand, special summon it, and then special summon a Psy-Frame Driver from your deck or your graveyard or your hand. You can then search your deck for any Psy-Frame card and add it to your hand. Now, this is the only one of the Psy-Frames that doesn't negate, of course, other than the driver himself. And it's really the card you want to see very early on in the game to actually set you up with certain cards like the Field Spell and the Trap that you're really going to want for the full duration of it. So that's why we play the 3 Alpha. Otherwise, I'm not a huge fan of the card. Mid to late game, this card is honestly banishment fodder for Psy-Frame Overload. But right at the start, this is really nice to kind of add that combo piece to your hand that you don't really have. Now we're going to move on to the negation Psy-Frames. We're going to start off with 3 copies of my personal favourite, 3 copies of Psy-Frame Gear Beta. Psy-Frame Gear Beta is similar to Alpha and similar to all the rest in that when a certain condition is met, you can special summon it from your hand and the driver from your hand, deck, or grave, and then use its effect. What Beta does is if your opponent declares an attack and you control no monsters, I should also note that all of these require you to control no monsters, which I forgot to mention on the Alpha. If your opponent's monster declares an attack and you control no monsters, you can reveal this card in hand, special summon it, special summon the driver from hand, deck, or graveyard, then negate the attack, destroy the attacking monster, and end the battle phase. That's huge. And then, of course, in the end phase, banish this card and the driver. Really, really powerful effect, really useful. It's like Valk on steroids, but of course it can be solemn warninged, which is a problem. But 3 copies of Beta is our answer to the battle phase. We then play 3 copies of Psy-Frame Gear Gamma. Psy-Frame Gear Gamma is our negation card for monster effects. If your opponent activates a monster effect and you control no monsters, you can special summon this in a driver, negate and destroy the activating effect monster, and then banish this card and the driver in the end phase. Delta is exactly the same, but for spells. And then we're playing 1 copy of Epsilon, which is the exact same thing, but for traps. So, I'm only playing the 1 Epsilon at the moment. As you guys will probably guess, traps are just not that relevant in the meta right now, so I don't feel the need to account for it in my main deck that heavily. I might side some more later on, but I feel like my side deck is so strong against traps anyway, and this card is going to be so much more slow because traps are inherently slower. So the deck is already slow enough because it reacts. So we really want to avoid this card because it's going to be the slowest of the Psy-Frames, and this means we're not going to win the attrition war if we're relying on this card. However, it is a level 2, and the level 2 tuners are much more important than the level 1s because arguably the level 8 synchros you can make with these two are much better. So we're going to move on to the other monsters in the main deck, and then we'll talk about the reasons why we don't have to worry about these cards banishing themselves on your opponent's turn, because you're probably sitting there thinking, Jamie, how do these cards synchro because they all banish themselves in your opponent's turn? Well, we'll get to that. I'm playing 3 copies of Card D. You don't do anything in your turn. You don't special summon in your turn because everything that's going to be leaving the field, i.e. this guy and everything like this guy, is going to be returning to the field and not special summoning. So if you think about it, you don't have to worry about any of the cards that say, oh, you can't special summon this turn. So we're playing 3 Card D. Your purpose is literally to summon this guy, set a trap, or play the field spell, tribute it, and end, and you just add hand traps to your hand. It's literally the reason why you play this card. We then play 3 copies of Wind Up Rabbit. A lot of players that were testing Psy-Frames realized very quickly that they had nothing to do in their own turn and they couldn't go aggressive if they wanted to. The problem is Psy-Frames are really good at negating stuff and leaving your opponent with a clear board or slowing your opponent down vastly. One big problem is they can't really push home the advantage if they haven't secured a good synchro summon. Now, Wind Up Rabbit solves that problem, and it basically puts your opponent on a 1400 clock, and it's a monster that you can summon, and you don't have to worry about it clocking your field, because at the end of your turn, you can just banish it away for the duration of your opponent's turn. So that's quite literally the reason why this card has gotten so overhyped at the moment, because every Psy-Frame player is trying to get hold of these. I've personally got 9, because I collect this card. I love this card to bits. And Wind Up Rabbit is just such a cool card in general, and the way it works is so crazy, and I'm so glad to be able to play it. That's half the reason why I wanted to get this deck in. But you literally play the Wind Up Rabbit for a 1400 per turn clock, just to give you a bit of attrition in your own turn. And if you've got like 2 or 3 of these accumulating, that's 28 each turn, and you can kind of get yourself in a position where you've got a big synchro monster punching home to remove any of the threats that are still left on the board, and then you've got the Wind Up Rabbits clocking your opponent down to game. So, coupled with the negation that the main Psy-Frame monsters are going to provide, these Wind Up Rabbits are going to be very, very lethal. Then the only other 2 monsters I play are 2 copies of Max C, because it is incredibly relevant in the meta right now, and why not draw yourself into more hand traps? Because that's basically how the deck works. So that's all of the monsters I play. I haven't done the good thing and counted them, so I must apologize for that. I'll probably put them in the deck list if I have time to put that in the description. For the spells are very simple. There's just 10 of them. It is a Raigeki, because you need a board clear every now and then. Your opponent can kind of get around your negations, so if your opponent kind of runs away with it and you bait on one of their cards, you can Raigeki the rest. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Duality, similar to Card D. You don't have to worry about special summon restrictions, so we play the 3 copies of Pot of Duality to get us through our deck and give us more options on what we want to pick. It's really nice turn 1 because it gets you towards the normal summon that you really want, because you want to be using your normal summon every turn, but you don't want to clog them all in your hand, so you want to realistically be naturally like drawing into like a normal summon every turn or 2. The dualities help you pick those, or they help you pick the correct negator to kind of fill a gap in your hand. I then play 3 copies of a really cool card that's also been hyped recently, and that's called Psychic Feel Zone. Now, what Psychic Feel Zone does is, we said earlier on that all of your guys are going to banish at the end of the turn in which they're summoned. Now, that's a problem, because your driver can only be pulled from deck, grave, or hand, and normally you have other ways to try and get this card into your graveyard, but the problem is, occasionally you're not going to be able to. That's where this card comes in. If you've gone, say, let's pick a Beta, for example. If you've gone in your opponent's turn, you've gone, oh, they attacked me. Beta, get driver. Okay, end of the turn, these 2 are going to banish. Psychic Feel Zone lets you target 1 Psychic non-tuner and 1 Psychic tuner in your banished zone. Makes you return them to the graveyard, and then lets you special summon a Psychic Synchro monster whose level equals the level of the 2 monsters you returned in face-up defense position. So you can play this card, sending these 2 back to your graveyard, which puts the driver back in the graveyard, by the way, and then gets you a Psy-Frame Lord Zeta from the extra deck, which is really cool. Or if you used a 2, it'll get you your Omega, which is fantastic. So it's a really, really good 1-card way into your synchro summons that also doubles as a way to recycle your drivers. Continuing with the synchro theme, we then play 3 copies of the most crucial spell in this deck, and that is Psy-Frame Circuit. Now, what Psy-Frame Circuit does is it has 2 effects. The first one is, if you've got a Psy-Frame monster on the board and your opponent attacks it, you can discard a Psy-Frame monster from your hand, and your monster will gain attack equal to the one you discarded. But that's pretty much irrelevant. The other effect this guy has is, immediately after you use one of your Psy-Frame monsters to special summon itself and a driver, you can activate the effect of Circuit and synchro these 2 monsters immediately in your opponent's turn into the Zeta or whatever else you want to use. The difference between this and Field Zone is this has no restriction over the type of monster you make. So if you synchro these two away, you could just immediately make any level 7. Like in your opponent's turn, you can be making Black Rose and nuking their board, or making Clearwing synchro and negating things. Possibilities are endless, and this card is phenomenal. Problem is, it's going to become the target of your opponent's MSTs really damn quick. So it's a really solid card. Absolutely love this, and this is what forces all you guys into the graveyard, and this is what's going to make your synchro plays really give you some profit, because it's not synchro plays, your negation plays really give you some profit, because you're going to negate things, and then you're going to get a beefcake synchro monster out of the deal. So that's the whole reason this card is in here. Then we're going to move on to the traps. The traps are very simple. There's only 6 of them at the moment, and 1 card is technically a proxy. We play 3 copies of Psy-Frame Overload. Now, this card is crazy. Psy-Frame Overload is a continuous trap. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can banish a Psy-Frame monster from either your hand or field, target 1 card your opponent controls, and banish it face down. Face down. That cannot be recovered by your conventional banishing targets. It literally can only be recovered by other effects that don't discern cards, like Necroface and things like that. It can't be picked up by any targeting effect or anything that selects a type of card. That's absolutely incredible. And as if this wasn't already good enough, if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it to search your deck for any Psy-Frame monster and add it to your hand. Ridiculous. We're going to come back to this card as well, because there's a better advantage engine with it that the deck can also highlight. This should be 2 copies of Psychic Overload. It's the Pot of Avarice for the deck that's also really good draw power. Select 3 Psychic type monsters in your graveyard, return them to the deck, then draw 2 cards. The Jar of Avarice is only because I have 1 Overload, sadly, but this card is absolutely ridiculous. I considered playing 3, but in my mind it's going to clog really heavily, so I'm sticking to 2, and then I'm testing 1 Solemn Warning. This could be a Torrential by the end of the day, but we'll see what happens. But Solemn Warning, really, really strong card. And that brings us to the end of the main deck. Now we're going to go into our extra deck. This is a toolbox of 15 Synchro Monsters. No Exceases, no Fusions. It's all Synchro Monsters, which is quite a while since I did a Synchro Monster exclusive deck. So it's going to be pretty cool to come back to that. So we're going to go through the extra deck with, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Saiframe Lord Omega. Both of the Saiframe synchros, I should note, have ways of getting themselves off the board, and Omega does it the best. Once per turn, during either player's main phase, you can banish this card from the field and 1 random card in your opponent's hand face up until your next standby phase. So this guy can clear himself off the board, so you can continue to negate cards. Also gives you the free information of knowing what 1 card in your opponent's hand, and it also locks one of those cards away. Also, as if that wasn't good enough, during your opponent's standby phase, if this card is on the field, you can target 1 banished card and return it to the graveyard. Now, there's 2 cool things you can do with that. You can loop this card. You can use this card to loop this, because you can banish it, search, and then in your opponent's turn, put it back, and then banish it in the next turn again. You can also use 2 of these to have 1 tag out during your turn, pass turn, and then in your opponent's turn, activate this guy to target another one of the cards. Sorry, to target the card that this card banished, and return it to your opponent's graveyard. This card will then return and they won't get the card back, which is pretty cool because you can now loop cards out of your opponent's hand and you've got 2 28 beaters that are cycling. And I mean, like, you use this card and then you return the card to the graveyard, and then when your opponent is in the main phase, you take another card out of their hand. So it's really, really strong, especially if you've got negation to like stop yourself dying if they can still OTK with like 2 less cards. So that's the 2 Omegas, and then the only other effect is when this card's in your graveyard, so I've got to hurry up, I'm running out of battery. If this card's in your graveyard, you can target 1 other card in either player's graveyard, shuffle this card and that card into the deck, which is really cool for recycling. I played 2 copies of Psy-Frame Lord Zeta. Zeta lets you, once per turn during either player's turn as a quick effect, you can banish this card and 1 face-up attack position special summon monster your opponent controls until your next standby phase. So again, it's a wind-up rabbit type effect that can tag itself out of the way for your negations, and it can also clear some really troublesome special summon monsters. So this card is absolutely phenomenal as well. And also, when this card is in your graveyard, which is absolutely great, you can target 1 Psy-Frame card in your graveyard, add that card to your hand, and put this card back in the extra deck. So it's self-recycling, but it's good to have 2 in case they find themselves banished. Then I'm playing a toolbox of 7s and 8s. For the first 7, I'm playing Clearwing Synchro Dragon, really strong negation, so I felt this was going to be a really good card if I wanted to put it on the board. Ancient Sacred Wyvern, really, really solid for the game push, especially if you're ahead on life, you can sometimes just summon this card for the game push, especially because you can summon it off of the beta. 1 Ancient Fairy Dragon, you play field spells, so it's good to be able to trade field spells out. one Black Rose Dragon, because to nuke the board in your opponent's turn is absolutely phenomenal, so we absolutely have to play this card. And then one Black Rose Moonlight Dragon, which only just became legal in the in Europe because of High Speed Riders. So it's really cool to be able to play this card. It's really useful to have out on the board, because if you're fearing large monsters that your opponent could possibly summon, you can use this to bounce them to their hand, which is really quite cool. So that was it for the 7s. And then for the 8s, I'm playing one Stardust Spark Dragon and one Stardust Dragon. These are both in here to respectively protect potential Floodgate cards that I side deck. These usually won't come out game 1. I then play one Scrap Dragon, one Thought Ruler Archfiend, and one Crimson Blader. And then the last card I'm testing is one copy of Blood Mephist. This deck goes into time a lot, as you might assume, because it's very, very attrition based. It's very reliant on what your opponent does. I wanted to have a solution for time proceedings, and I didn't like Fortune Tune that other people have been playing, so I'm testing the one Blood Mephist, because when the turn passes over to my opponent, they have to deal with a 2800 monster that's going to burn them for every card they set and for every card they currently control in the standby phase. So this is a card that I'm testing. But yeah, guys, that brings me to about the end of the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. I definitely think this deck is a good bit of fun. I don't think it's by any means top tier, but you're definitely going to be seeing it kind of in the early rounds of Swiss at major events. A lot of people are testing it. A lot of people do actually think this is pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Please feel free to leave me your feedback in the comment section down below. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more of the same, and share this with your friends if they're interested in a Psy-Frame deck profile. But as always, I'm Jamie the Kid 00, and I'll see you guys next time with some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Related content. Peace out. Bye-bye.